Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Before I introduce myself and before I introduce the topic, I just have a couple statements and then I have a question for everybody that's listening. So the first two statements are as follows. The first one is you get in whatever you put out. Or, as we like to say, whatever you put in, you get out. And another terminology I like to use, always being the bridge for someone else, when it's their turn, and turning around and being that helping hand and lending hand. So my question before we start a discussion is, have you been that lending or helping hand for the person after you or the generation after you? I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Clyde Killebrew IV, and I'm a first year graduate student here in Kutztown University in the student affairs profession. And I also serve as a resident director for Berks Hall and a residence life housing and dining services here in Kutztown University as well. And I'd like to introduce the topic of student affairs and not only why it's important for myself being in the role as a student affairs professional in the future, but also for higher education in all universities as well as society as a whole. So a couple topics I first want to bring up. I want to introduce an article from Andrea Dittman and Nicole Stevens, where they talk about the achievement gap based off of social class. And when students, particularly first generation college students enter a college setting, and let's assume that this is in a PWI and not a HBCU, they're going into an arena they've never been a part of before. They're attending classes that may not be based off of their environment or background. They're getting assignments from professors that may not look like them or particularly have the same values as them. And in the past, the only bridge between their grade and the actual student's effort and work was the professor. So, how does that student actually know, especially going into an arena they've never been a part of before, that this is right for them? And something that Dittman and Stevens brought up in their article talking about achievement gaps based off of social class is that when a first generation college student, when they already go into a setting where they feel like their academic performance is based off of their fit for that school, or instead of using fit, we'll use a terminology such as, um, time. Their time in school, is it worth it? And if their academic performance is connected to that and they're not performing particularly well, or they get that first grade back and it's not as great as they used to have in college or in high school, they're going to take that with them as like a negative, stigma. They're going to move that along throughout the rest of their career and they may drop out. So, what are some solutions to that? What are some solutions? Who can they speak to? What are those students' outlet when the classes are only 3 days a week and they're just going to class and going home or have a job? What keeps the students in school for more than a year when the odds are stacked against them? Well, according to NASPA, the definition of student affairs that they introduced to us is a critical component. It's described as a critical component of the higher education system. And the work done by the student affairs professionals, it helps the students embark on a lifelong journey, not only in the classroom, but after their college career is over. And this can be done through putting them in organizations such as campus involvement. We talk about athletics and their ability to bring revenue and students in at the same time, and bring a sort of campus community within, the school or university. Uh, and it also, other ways that it helps is when students are able to embark on journeys in school where they're able to talk about their experience in the classroom as a student, or maybe like their experience as a student, maybe outside of the classroom, like how they interact with other students, how they interact with professors. When you have organizations that are formed to keep students comfortable, soon jobs will be able to be formed. And we talk about things like myself, such as residence life, we talk about orientation, we talk about admissions. There are so many other there's so many other departments in the student affairs profession that are geared to keep students here and keep them striving for higher goals and higher levels of achievement. And going back to the beginning of the story I told you about being that bridge, the students that embark on those 4 or 5 year journeys and they graduate, there's students like me that join a graduate student profession, whether it be through an assistantship or a professional job. They can be that bridge for the future students. So any issue that they had embarking on their journey, say if it was lack of representation, if it was lack of resources for them, they can now be that person to make sure the next generation has those resources, has that representation in PWIs or other, areas where, students may not feel heard or feel accepted. Um, and it's necessary. And I always say that student affairs, actually college in itself is a microcosm of the real world. So when we talk about student affairs, and I hear a lot of people ask, you know, why is it so important if you're just going to be staying in the student affairs field? If you're just going to be staying in school, what if you don't work in school? Are those skills going to be transferable? Well, I like to say one last thing and bringing it back all the way to the beginning. The first school, the first university back in 1890 that created a position for the student affairs profession was Harvard University with Levero and Russell Briggs, who is introduced as the Dean of Men. And of course, it's 1890, so this is back still. We're still having a long road to go in terms of equality and women's rights. But that position was geared to have the students, get out of the academic setting and talk about their experience as a whole. Where do I live? How's my environment with the residents in my wing or the people I'm living with in my dorm? I may need money. Can we talk about financial aid? Um, I play a sport or I play an instrument. I want to be able to keep that a part of me, even though I'm taking these courses, even though the major that I have may not be directly correlating with that talent that I may have. Those are what the student affairs professionals are there for. Now, once again, it's not supposed to be easy. I would never say that it is easy. Um, but like I said, whatever you put in the beginning, you're going to get out of it. And I've seen firsthand students that have taken their families from, poverty, being able to take students, you know, out of that space and have their families get used to the system of going to college and getting an education and also having a career for themselves afterwards. And that's the real world, in my opinion. That's society. That's what we should be looking towards. Um, of course, the degree, when you look at it at the end of it, and it says student affairs and higher education, you don't really see the skills that you're able to take from a college setting and apply it to the real world. Well, I'll share a few things for myself. Um, Organization skills, leadership skills, ability to practice self-care, ability to notice when someone else needs care, ability to have conversations with people, the ability to travel and network with people with organizations such as NODA and Makuho, those conferences throughout the year. If I wasn't in college, I wouldn't have the ability to travel like that, unless I found that outlet. And that same outlet, I would need a mentor. I would need a group of people that could guide me to the right resources. And that's what we're essentially here to do. And, you know, I see the professors that have taught us throughout the first semester in the student affairs profession, and you can sense that they care. You can sense that they understand the long term of what we're trying to do here. And I think the best part of student affairs and why it's so important is because it's changing every single day. We take in what the real world is talking about, such as, you know, the pandemic, social issues, and we take it on and we learn how to discuss those hard conversations and be able to take, steps in order to find solutions for those situations. Um, that's what we're here to do essentially in student affairs. Uh, and then higher education, it helps them out as well in the long term because the more students engaged in student affairs, the more students engaged in helping each other out, hey, more students end up being retained and recruited. And in the grand scheme of things, that's our goal as well. So tying it all together, once again, whatever you put in is what you're going to get out, and always being that bridge for the person after you or for the generation after you. So I like to ask again before I close off, are you going to be that bridge for the person, for the generation after you? I'm Clyde Killebrew IV. Thank you for joining my TED Talk.